I finally got these two bad boys painted, and it's been long enough that they've endured sufficient nerfs and points changes that they are not the obscene meat grinders I hear they were proving to be after the 9th edition codex dropped. I wanted to play them when they were a little more sensible. So here we go. After getting the excess biomass off the table, I gathered my forces. It's a Leviathan list, led by a flying hive tyrant with adrenal glands for +1 strength and +1 move. It's packing the Reaper of Obliterax relic to cause a mortal wound each time it does a wound. And it has the Warlord trait of adaptive biology, so that each time it sustains a wound on a 5+ roll, it's ignored. It will be cruising in with 3 Tyrant Guard with Lash Whip Bone Cleaver and Adrenal Glands to make them a little more speedy and to hit a little harder. The tip of the spear will be backed up by a Neurothrope with the Resonance Barb Relic and the Warlord trait of Synaptic Tendrils so they can use its ability of Warp Siphon twice. 3 units of Tyranid warriors with dual bone swords and death spitters, with 3 venom cannon located amongst them. And finally, a Maleceptor, and I'm spending the 15 extra points for the adaptive physiology of hardened biology, so that any damage 1 attacks that come its way, well, it gets +1 on the saving throw, and seeing as he'll be hanging back in cover, this could be very useful. Okay. The Reaper Flyrant started behind the Tyrant Guard, which was good because the Marines won the roll-off. With the new Nephilim rules, we both get a command point, the Marines move forward and open up, but the Tyrant Guard soak up the damage. We both get another command point, and in response I activate Guide Mind across my force for exploding 6s on ranged weapons within 24 inches. Anywho, they all advance, and the Hive Tyrant gets Onslaught and Catalyst cast upon it. I placed Catalyst on the Tyrant and not the Guard as I usually do, in case my plan goes wrong, which turned out was the case. The warriors move in as the Neurothrope holds back to chain stuff up through the synaptic link. Onslaught lets me advance and charge, so that's 16 inches. Plus D6 inches, ignoring terrain because it flies, plus another inch for adrenal glands, and with Shard Lure allowing me to roll 3d6 for the charge and pick the 2 best, I got a successful turn 1 charge with the Flyrant, and the plan was to hopefully wipe out the diminished squad and use Overrun for a command point to move again, and get it back behind the advancing Tyrant Guard and into safety. Then, rinse and repeat, because if this bug goes down, I lose all of my synaptic imperatives. However, transhuman and some absolutely awful rolls on my part left it stranded. The Ultramarines all opened fire and then swarmed it. But amazingly, adaptive biology and catalyst and armor saves soaked up the wrath of the entire force. It only lost 2 wounds. This allowed my warriors and Maleceptor to move forward unharmed while the Marines were distracted. The next turn, I pondered using Encircle the Prey to get it out of there, but decided I'm going all in. I want to really see what this big fellow can do. So, I activated the Synaptic Imperative of Relentless Ferocity and gave it some rapid regeneration to get it back to full wounds. The Tyrant falls back and charges, and now that I have a few command points, let's use the strat Trampling Charge to get some mortal wounds in there. I used the Neurothrope to chain up a Catalyst. I could have given the Tyrant the Warp Siphon 3d6 Psychic Test and discard 1 to give it a better chance of casting it on itself, but it's in the thick of it. I need this power to be active. No chance of failure. So, the Neurothrope chains his own casting of Catalyst 4th, and with the Resonance Barb gets an extra +2 on the die roll of 3d6 and discard 1. Sorted. Catalyst goes up, the chances of me being defeated go down. Now, this is where the tag team worked wonders. The Flying Hive Tyrant is huge. It does a lot of damage, and with all my buffs, it is incredibly resilient. Its sudden rush into the fray on turn 1 stalls the Marine advance as they now try and take it down. The Maleceptor scuttles forward to lurk behind a wall and claim an objective. The Tyranid warrior groups push forward, stopping anything from moving on its position. It just sits on that objective and each turn casts Hive Nexus so it can apply a synaptic imperative to one unit. And so it applies Psychic Oversight to itself so it can perform a psychic action and still chain forward 2 powers. Generally, this was a Psychic Scream and a Smite, and each time I get a successful Psychic Power or a Psychic Ability on a 7+, Psychic Overload causes 3 mortal wounds to the nearest enemy within 12 inches. As the Ultramarines realise that the Flyrant isn't coming down anytime soon, and it's the Maleceptor that's carving them up with a steady stream of mortal wounds, they find warrior units blocking access to the real threat, and these fellows are also contesting other objectives. If moved upon, the mortal wound rain will pour down on those attackers, and even if they reach the Maleceptor, it's okay in combat, and bolters and chainswords are 1 damage, so it'll have a 2-up armor save because of hardened biology. Each turn it reaches out to the Space Marine characters and does its psychic interrogation. On those turns where the Neurothrope's synaptic tendrils provided Warp Siphon is available, chucking it to the Maleceptor gives it a better chance of getting a command point from the test being over the target's leadership. Plus, because Warp Siphon lasts for the whole turn, its smites are more likely to go Super Smite, and if there had been any Psykers in the enemy force, Psychic Scream would have had a good chance of stripping away enemy psychic powers. Nifty. So when the Flyrant finally cleared everything from engagement range, it retreated back behind the Tyrant Guard and then moved into the other side of the board to engage and eradicate a couple of small squads that were fighting a 4 Tyranid warrior unit to try and get the objective there. This was a fun game. Even when the plan went immediately wrong, it still has enough pep to keep the pressure on the opponent. The Flying Hive Tyrant with Adaptive Biology and the Reaper of Obliterax, teamed up with the Maleceptor with Adaptive Biology. Quite the pair, and a lot of fun to field. Okay, so I played a game last night at my local. It was after the new data slate capped the Reaper to 3 mortal wounds and transhumanist for Synapse monsters only. A couple of new things I learned playing this pair. The psychic action actually fills a cast slot. So, the Maleceptor can do its action and then cast 1 more power, not 2. Right, still not too shabby. Also, Catalyst and Adaptive Biology, despite one being a psychic power and the other a psychic trait, the 2 can't both be active. So, Catalyst on the Tyrant was actually redundant. This all would have meant I would have done a few less mortal wounds and the Tyrant would have lost a few more wounds. Didn't affect this battle, but good to keep in mind for future ones.